This is what you should focus on when you're studying evolution. You should focus on evidence for evolution, sources of variation, theories of Lamarck and Darwin, applying the theories of Lamarck and Darwin, differences between natural selection and artificial selection, punctuated equilibrium, speciation, mechanism for reproductive isolation. We will do human evolution on the next lesson. A theory is an explanation of something that has been observed in nature, which can be supported by facts, generalizations, tested hypotheses, model, and laws. A hypothesis is a possible solution to a problem. Evidence of evolution, fossil evidence, the evidence that shows characteristics that make us similar to or different from African apes, comes from largely from a study of fossils, thousands of fossils fragments. Genetic evidence, scientists state that organisms are closely related and are likely to have a common ancestor if they have identical DNA structure, similar sequence of genes, similar portions of DNA with no functions, and similar mutations, mitochondrial DNA. Species that are closely related have a greater similarity to each other than distant species. Cultural evidence from studies of tools and weapons as well as language is also used to show similarities and differences between humans and African apes. Sources of variation, or the things that causes variation, the genotypes and therefore phenotypes appearance of individuals of the same species are different from each other because of crossing over. Number 1, which occurs in prophase 1 of meiosis. It involves an exchange of genetic material, leading to new combination of maternal and paternal genetic material in each new cell resulting from meiosis. Number 2, random arrangement of maternal and paternal chromosome at the equator during the metaphase allows different combinations of chromosomes or chromatids to go into each new cell resulting from meiosis, making them different. Number 3, random fertilization between different egg cells and different sperm cells formed by meiosis result in offspring that are different from each other. Random mating between organisms within a species leads to different set of offspring from each mating pair. A mutation changes the structure of a gene or chromosome and therefore the organism's genotype. Since the genotype influences the phenotype, it creates organisms with new, different characteristics from one generation to the next. These are the possible questions you can find in your question paper. Theories of Lamarck and Darwin. Lamarck explained evolution using the following 2 laws. The first law, the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Characteristics developed during the life of an individual acquired characteristics can be passed on to their offspring. The law of use and disuse is as an organism uses a structure or an organ more regularly, it becomes better developed or enlarged. If an organism does not use a structure or an organ fluently, it becomes less developed or reduced in size and may disappear altogether. Charles Darwin explained evolution in terms of natural selection, which state that there's a great deal of variation among members of the same species, organisms with favorable characteristics which enable them to cope with challenges in the environment survive. Organisms which do not have favorable characteristics that allow them to cope with challenges in the environment dies. Now, if they give you a scenario here, you have to apply the ideas of Lamarck and Darwin. They say that there are many cacti plants. There is variation among the plants. Some have long roots and some have short roots. Only cacti plants with longer roots are present. At B, the ones with shorter roots are absent or they have died. Only the plants with longer roots were able to reproduce to form offsprings with longer roots. How will Darwin explain this? As a result of genetic variation in the cacti population, some cacti plants had longer roots than others. As a result of drought, competition of water occurred. Plants with shorter roots died and those with longer roots survived. This is called natural selection. The allele for longer roots was passed on to subsequent generations. Eventually, all the plants had longer roots. And how will Lamarck explain this? All cacti had short roots originally. Cacti frequently stretched their roots. They did this to reach deeper water in the soil. As a result, the roots became longer. The characteristic of long roots acquired in this way was then passed on to the next generation. Eventually, all the plants had longer roots. Now let's look at the differences between natural selection and artificial selection. For a long time, humans have been doing breeding experiments to develop organisms with a selected set of desirable characteristics. For example, increased quality and quantity of milk produced by cows, or drought resistance and increased sugar content in sugarcane. This is achieved by artificial selection, which is a similar process to natural selection. However, in artificial selection differs from natural selection in the following ways. In natural selection, the environment or nature is the selective force. In artificial selection, humans represent the selective force. In natural selection, selection is irresponsible to suitability to the environment. In artificial selection, selection is in response to satisfying human needs. In natural selection, it occurs within a species. In artificial selection may involve one or more species, as in crossbreeding. Let's look at punctuated equilibrium. This is a hypothesis that explains the speed at which evolution takes place through natural selection. According to punctuated equilibrium, evolution is not always gradual, as proposed by Lamarck and Darwin. Evolution involves a long period of time where species do not change or change very little, known as equilibrium. This alternates with punctuated by short periods of time where rapid changes occur. As a result, new species are formed in a short period of time relative to the long period of no time or little change. This is supported by the absence of transitional fossils, usually named missing links, indicating the period of rapid change. Now let's look at speciation. As a result of natural selection taking place over a period of time, the characteristics of organisms may change to such an extent that they cannot reproduce with original members of that species to produce fertile offspring. We said that they have become new species. This is called speciation. Speciation, a population of a particular species have become split by a geographical barrier, e.g. a river. As a result, the two parts of the population cannot interbreed. There is no gene flow between the two populations. Natural selection occurs independently in each population. This is due to different environmental conditions. As a result, the two populations become genotypically and phenotypically different over a period of time. Even if the two populations are mixed at later time, they will not be able to interbreed again. We say that one or both parts of the population have become new species. Speciation. Lastly, let's talk about mechanism for reproductive isolation. Geographic isolation causes speciation. Reproductive isolation isolates the gene pool of a species. Examples of reproductive isolations: breeding at different times of the year, species-specific courtship behavior,